Let us be attentive to a word from the gospel. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, the home of Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. There they gave a dinner for him. Martha served, and Lazarus was one of those at the table with him. Mary took a pound of costly perfume made of pure nard, anointed Jesus' feet, wiped them with her hair. The house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But Judas Iscariot, one of his disciples, the one who was about to betray him, said, "Why was this perfume not sold for 300 denarii and the money given to the poor?" He said this not because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief, and he kept the common purse and used to steal what was put into it. Jesus said, "Leave her alone. She bought it so that she might keep it for me for the day of my burial. You always have the poor with you, but you do not always have me." This is the word of our Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Let us pray. Holy God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts here today be holy and acceptable to you, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. In the middle of the 19th century, during the Industrial Revolution, the docks of London were a hard and tough place. The seafarers coming and going from the ships, the demand for goods requested worldwide, with shipping now available. In many ways, it was a desperate time for many people. And the life of a dock worker was not an easy one. It was dangerous. Unloading and loading the ships was tricky business. One slip, one improper placement, one careless move, and it meant loss of limb or loss of life. If you lost a limb, you might as well have lost your life as well. Not to mention the life of seafarers, the long journeys over to America or to wherever, not knowing if it would be their last voyage ever. And the docks, they weren't just filled with workers, but the grunge, the filth, the dirtiness of the workers of dock life. They were also filled with widows and orphans, of the seafarers that had gone on their last voyage and never come home. Poverty and disease ran rampant along the docks of London during this time, all in the name of progress. But in the midst of the poverty, the disease, the grunge, the soot, the danger, the death, there was something going on along the docks. The church was building its most beautiful churches in the most desolate portion of town. Breathtaking stained glass, fine organs, support of great choirs in the midst of the dank. I don't know how many of you have been to docks before. The one I remember the most that stunk the worst was definitely the one in Boston. As we stood there waiting for our ship to come and take us our whatever, it stunk. It was stinky. Just seawater and fish, and the work smells terrible. And that's in a time that it's much cleaner. So amongst the dirt and the soot in that time in London, everything was covered with coal dust and soot and the ash from the houses. The church was building the most beautiful churches. They were far more beautiful and generously built than those in the wealthy parts of London, along the docks. And not only the physical beauty that goes into the most impoverished portion, but the spiritual, emotional, and human physical beauty was happening alongside it. Soup kitchens, church-run schools for the orphans and the children of the widows. There were social justice ministries to be found on every corner. The church was adorning what seemed to be a place of only darkness, death, and strife and struggle with physical, spiritual, and emotional beauty. Not only did it look beautiful, but the work of the church at this time during the Industrial Revolution along the docks of London was a giving and generous place to the poor that we always have among us, as Jesus says. The church was bringing life to a place that felt lifeless and unworthy. The church was spreading nard, a year's salary worth of nard, onto the feet of Jesus in one of the darkest, most desolate, hard places. The church in London at that time was living out our gospel story today. It anointed the community with lavishness, love, and service, with extravagant generosity that doesn't realize that spent resources and doesn't recognize spent resources as wasted resources. A church that lathers on the expensive nard in love and celebration. Our scripture today, this story about Mary, we have to pull ourselves back a little bit because Jesus comes back to Bethany after having traveled a long ways, and he comes back to Bethany first to bring Lazarus back to life. These two sisters, Mary and Martha, called for him, and he said, I'll get there. Jesus' response was, I'll get there. He finally shows up and they say, where you been? He's dead. Our brother Lazarus has died. If you had only come moments earlier, you could have saved him. And he says, take me to the tomb. He's been in there a little bit, so he stinks. Because there wasn't embalming and there wasn't all that stuff. He's stinking and rotten in the tomb. There's a smell. And he says, roll away the stone. And I'm sure everybody that was with him said, that stone's keeping that smell inside that hole. We're not moving it. Roll away the stone. He tells Lazarus to get up and come out. He does. Lazarus raised from the dead, and now we find him immediately after this at Lazarus' house, eating dinner. Celebrating life from death. Mary comes with a jar of expensive, pure nard. Falling before Jesus, she pours the perfume on his feet, wiping it with her hair. Out of sheer joy and gratitude and extravagance, she does this. Then she got old Judas. What's she doing? Why is she doing this? She can't do this. That was 300 denarii worth of perfume. Why is she wasting it? This could have been sold to the poor. 300 denarii. A denarii was worth 1 day's wages. That was 1 day's wages in that time. 300 days worth of wages wasted on the feet of Jesus? This could have been sold and given to the poor. Now, we know what John says about Judas. He's a thief, he's a cheat, he doesn't actually care about the poor. He has a selfish ambition to keep it for himself. Because I don't know how he got put in charge of the coin purse, but he did. So he wanted 300 days worth of wages put in his own pocket. He wanted to hoard it, he wanted to grasp it, he wanted to control it. Jesus' response, leave her alone. She bought this specifically for this time, for when I was going to die, to anoint me. You'll always have the poor. You'll always have the poor. That's a terrible statement. It's actually a powerful statement, but it's been used for terrible means to not actually help people. There are always going to be poor people. Move on. I've always been hesitant about this statement. First, we'll start there and we'll get past it. It really feels like a get out of jail free card somehow, that we can get out of jail to not do the work, to not actually care about the poor, because there's always going to be poor. Jesus is making a statement. He's not saying ignore them, you're always going to have the poor, worry about just some spiritual stuff. He's saying that there's always going to be systems in place in which people are stuck. There's always going to be people taking advantage of other people and exploiting them. There will always be poor because we live in a sinful, broken world. There will always be greed and strife. There will always be this brokenness. So there will always be poor. He is saying you have every single day an opportunity to care for someone else who has less. He says, you will keep working past this day, Judas, for the injustices to break the cycle. You should keep positioning yourself on the docks of London, on the corners, making schools and soup kitchens, bringing beauty and life to what seems lifeless and broken. So yes, there's always going to be poor. There's always going to be people who have not, as long as the haves hold the coin purse and do not give and keep their own selfish ambitions in mind. There's always going to be Judas. There's always a piece of Judas in each of us. I don't know how Judas got to be the accountant or the treasurer of the group, as the grasper, as the gripper, as the one who wants control. He wants to hold things and keep them. It's a fascinating juxtaposition to put Mary and Judas next to each other in this story. You've got Judas who seeks to control and hold these things. John clearly says he had no intent of giving it to the poor. He didn't care. He just wanted control. He wanted his selfish portion. We all got a little bit of Judas in us, a little bit of that selfishness. We all want to keep it and hold it and grasp it. We've got a piece of us that says that's a waste of money. That's a waste of money. Don't do that with it. Stops our generosity, stops our extravagance because it's a waste. Like I said earlier, spent resources necessarily don't mean wasted resources. We do it in the guise of stewardship. We've got to be good stewards, so we can't spend that money that way. We can't use it that way. We've got to hold on to it because we're not being good stewards of it. It's the unwillingness to share because of insert whatever excuse we've got. It's that part of all of us that wants to keep stuff and things and grasp. It's the part that misses out on profound pieces of ministry and life because we're trying to control and grasp and we're only worried about how much we have. It's that part of us that can't see beyond ourselves. Judas couldn't see beyond himself. He couldn't see beyond that moment and that time. He couldn't see beyond the coin purse being full of 300 denarii to see that the greater, the bigger picture is. She's anointing Jesus for his death, for his resurrection. She's celebrating life. She's being extravagant with her love. He can't see beyond it. But then you put that next to Mary, who spills 300 days worth of wages on Jesus' feet. In the most extravagant, profound worship, she wipes them with her hair. She's extravagant and relentless with her love and her generosity. She is generous with herself and her life. She is generous with her time. That in this moment I am going to give myself wholly to God. Mary's extravagant generosity is the call on our lives. Holy lives are generous lives. Holy lives that are generous lives look like frivolous lives to the world. Why would you give to that person? Why would you give that away? Why would you share that with them? They're just going to burn it, smoke it, drink it. It's extravagant. It's frivolous to the world, but for us, it's a response in gratitude to what Jesus has done, bringing life to the lifeless. Mary's giving and generosity bursts forth from her out of gratitude. Yes, they confront Jesus immediately when he comes and they say, "You're too late." He says, "Just take me to Lazarus." I can't imagine how grateful she is. I can't even fathom how thrilled she is that her brother is there before her alive. It's in that gratitude that she responds. That's how our gratitude, how our generosity bursts forth. It is a response. It is a response to what God has done for us. When we recognize everything is a gift from God. Every moment, everything, literally, things, from money to house to car to whatever it is a gift from God. It's almost impossible for us not to just respond with gratitude. And to respond out of that gratitude with generosity. But first we have to acknowledge that God has done so much for us. That has brought to life the lifeless. Has filled us up in ways that we can't explain. She gives out of sheer love for Jesus. And it should be the same for all of us. It's that love and that recognition of the grace and new life that we have. We're not trying to earn anything. We're not giving, trying to convince God, hey, remember God, I gave X amount of dollars. You've got to do something for me. No seed money thing here. It's simply a response. And it's not just about money. We don't give to get. Christmas time, right? We just give gifts. It's fun. It's a good time. Enjoy it. We enjoy it in our household. We enjoy giving gifts. It's wonderful. Her gift is one that is of drastic openness versus restraint. We can't restrain ourselves from giving. Whether it's money, whether it's time, whether it's talents. I'm the king of restraining myself from giving of talents. I don't, that whole embarrassment thing, they're going to judge me, right? I don't want them to judge me. What were they going to think? I remember when I was in Laurel as an intern, I was fairly new at playing the guitar, and they said, why don't you play the guitar? And I was like, whoa, not church. Nope, not in front of like 125 to 175 people. Nah, I'm good. They said, you can sit in the balcony. And the balcony was much like this one. It's actually a choir loft there. So I did. And everybody else thought it was someone else playing guitar, which was great. Because I wasn't embarrassed. And then they made me sit in front and play along with them another time. No one go requesting that. I am really rusty on the guitar, so don't. I'm severely out of practice. But see, we do that, right? We restrain ourselves from the gift. We pull the Judas line. Well, that could have been done this way. Versus just giving. Giving what we have. Whatever it is. Using our hair. Using our hair, all of ourselves. We need to toss the chains of restraint aside and be free in our generosity. Like the churches on the docks of London, extravagance of love and service. Our lives should mimic Mary, wide open to Jesus and to one another, wide open to the world, to share, to give, not with restraint, but just freely. Wide open to those in need, to celebrate life. We recognize first and foremost that we've been given life. Life abundant. And we recognize it and we show gratitude for it. And then we open ourselves up to give. Brothers and sisters, our lives, our holy lives, are generous, open lives. Amen.